Paige Pritchard is a spending coach who helps women stop impulse shopping and overspending. She discovered her passion for helping women develop healthier spending habits through her own personal struggles with impulse shopping. When at age 22, she blew through her $60,000 salary after graduating from college. Whew! By uncovering the root cause of Paige's shopping and making a commitment to developing healthier spending habits, she turned things around. She paid off her $40,000 of student loan debt. She cash flowed an MBA. She became a homeowner, and she built a multiple six-figure investment portfolio by age 29. Paige is a certified life coach through the Life Coach School and has coached thousands of women to become better spenders and reach their full financial potential through her social channels, her podcast, the Money Love Podcast, and her group coaching membership called Overcoming Overspending. Now, here's where it gets exciting for me. Her work has been featured in publications like NBC News, The Washington Post, The Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, The Guardian, and she's been on the Dr. Phil show. So she is big time. Paige, welcome to the Find Me the Money podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Tracy.
I know we both like talking about divorce and money. So this is going to be a great episode, I think. And I know you coach so many women through money issues, focusing really on overspending. But I assume you've probably worked with a lot of women who are getting divorced, correct?
Many, yes.
And I'm wondering if there are some common things that you have seen in what they have asked about, what they're concerned about, or their financial struggles as they're going through divorces.
Yeah. Well, I think, the women typically in my community, again, who are struggling with overspending, there's a couple of things that I typically see. I think the first, which I know that you're really big on, is there tends to kind of be this avoidance with money, kind of like the head in the sand, ostrich head in the sand, and just kind of being of the mindset of, oh, my partner, my spouse, my husband is going to handle the money. And then when they kind of get themselves into the process of divorce, it's kind of whiplash a little bit because they're like, oh, well, gosh, like now this is something that I actually have to start paying attention to. And for years and years and years, they've just been spending, especially if you're married to somebody who maybe is a very high income earner where there was always a lot of money and you were never really in a position where you had to give much thought to how much you were spending. It was like the money's just kind of always there. Now you're kind of finding you're in a situation where you're like, I'm going to have to start paying a lot closer attention to that, to what I'm spending. And of course, there's all sorts of things that come up with that. So I think the biggest thing is just like paying attention to the money and to really start paying attention to your spending habits.
Budgeting never sounds like a fun process to anyone, does it?
No.
And so to suddenly be in a position where you're going to need to start budgeting is really hard for some people to wrap their minds around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I don't even call it a budget in my community because so many people just have such a visceral reaction to that word. I think so many of us, when we hear the word budget, we think frugality and restriction and, only people who are struggling with money have to budget. I actually call a budget, the term that I always use is a money map, because that's truly how I view a budget. It's just a plan for your money. It's just like having a plan in any other area of your life. If you have a project at work, you're going to have a project roadmap for that. If you want to lose weight, you're going to have a very specific plan on, your how many calories you need to be eating and the plan with that. And your money is no different. That's what your budget is. It's just, where am I currently right now? Where do I want to be in the future? And your budget is simply just the roadmap, kind of like the step-by-step guide, the turn-by-turn directions that are just going to get you from where you are to where you are now. Whether you're not making a lot of money, whether you are making a lot of money, I'm of the mindset that it doesn't matter how much money you make, you always need a plan for your money. But I think a lot of people, when they think about budgeting, they think of, tons of line items and tracking every single cent. And it doesn't have to be that way. Managing your money can actually be really easy. A lot of it can be automated. It doesn't have to be this huge, complicated, scary thing.
What is the best place to get started if you haven't been on a budget before and you don't know much about your family's finances? Where do you recommend getting started on that?
Yeah, the first thing is just getting a complete holistic picture, which I know you're also really big on in the divorce
Yes.
process. Like, it's important either way. It's going to be important while you're going through the divorce process, and it's going to be really important after the divorce process, just for you having a plan for your money moving forward. So, starting with a holistic plan of course, the obvious stuff. What are all the bills that we have to pay? What are the things coming out of the accounts every single month? But then also getting a sense of those variable categories. It's not typically the bills that throw people off. Most people know like the bills they have to pay and what's coming out. It's the variable categories. It's how much are we spending on groceries? How much are we spending on, Uber Eats and DoorDash every month? How much am I spending on clothing for the kids? How much are we spending on just entertainment? You have to start getting a grasp on that. And the easiest way to do that is just to pull up your statements, bank statements, credit card statements, start going through everything. Most statements nowadays will even just do that summary for you, right? Like if you pull your credit card statement, a lot of the times on the credit card statement, it'll tell you, it groups your transactions into categories automatically. So you're not having to go and total up every single thing. It'll tell you, like, hey, in the last statement period over the last 30 days, you spent $500 on dining out. But you have to start with getting a sense of what's going on and getting your arms wrapped around that. That's the first place that you have to start so you can assess, is this good? Is this okay? Am I spending too much? Do I have some wiggle room? What changes are going to have to be made in this new scenario where I'm on my own, just using my own income or using, alimony that I'm going to be receiving or child support I'm going to be receiving. But that's where you have to start, is just with that complete holistic picture.
Well, when my clients are going through divorce, they typically have to fill out a form that is usually called financial disclosure form or financial affidavit. And usually in that form, which varies from state to state, but usually they have to fill out like a monthly budget. They have to show what their monthly expenses are. And what I find with my clients is that when they are estimating how much they spend in these different categories on a monthly basis, they almost always underestimate. If I ask you right now, how much do you spend every month on eating out? I think most of us would underestimate. Do you have the same experience with your clients?
Absolutely. We always have a tendency to underestimate. And I always refer to this as kind of like the death by a thousand cuts syndrome with our
Mhm.
spending. Because when you're in the moment, when you're running through the Chick-fil-A line and there's $30 here and, $20 here and $50 here, in those moments, it doesn't really seem like much. It doesn't seem like a whole lot. But when you actually sit down and look at a 30-day period and you total that all up over time, it's often shocking to a lot of people how much they're actually spending. And to your point, I find that most people, when they're just kind of like giving their best guess, they usually underestimate it sometimes by more than half,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Like they estimate that they're spending $300 a month on takeout when the reality is they're actually spending like over $600 a month on takeout. And that's what can happen when you don't have that transparency into your spending and where your money's actually going.
It adds up so
So
fast.
fast.
Now, the title of this episode is Spending Your Way Through Your Divorce. So I want to focus a little bit on that divorce spending, and I want to talk about something that we call revenge spending during the divorce. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, revenge spending is pretty much just like it sounds. It can transpire in a lot of different ways, but ultimately it just really comes down to this feeling of loss of control, wanting to regain a sense of control when external circumstances in our life feel really out of control, like when you're going through a divorce, and also kind of wanting to like get back at your ex for whatever reason. Maybe your ex was cheating on you and unfaithful to you, maybe, just for whatever reason, right? If there's some bad blood during the divorce, it's kind of just wanting to get that one up on your spouse. The problem with revenge spending is that oftentimes it doesn't actually give you like the satisfaction that ultimately you're looking for, because I find, and the clients that I've talked to who are going through a divorce, what I hear all the time from a lot of people is, my spouse wants me, and I'm not saying this is true in every situation, but where there's a bit of a bit of bad blood, my spouse wants to see me fail financially. Like, I hear this a lot. Nothing would make my spouse happier than for him to see me flounder financially. And revenge spending and going out and spending a bunch of money and buying a bunch of things you can't afford, buying the new car, buying the new handbag, buying the new wardrobe. I know it like really feels good in that moment. And I know it probably feels very justified, but spending, like overspending, spending yourself into oblivion, spending more than you have and putting yourself in a difficult financial situation, putting yourself into debt, if we really think about it, is like, is that truly getting back at your ex? Like, to put yourself in a more disempowering financial
Right.
situation. To me, I'm like, if you really want to get back at your ex, go take care of you financially. Like, that should be the priority. But revenge spending is very common. I mean, again, it comes out in all areas of life, but I see it happen a lot with divorces, and you just need to be conscious of it. Like, that's the first place you have to start. You have to be conscious of your natural inclination to go, ha ha ha, I'll show you. I'll get back at you using money as a tool to do that. But you really have to challenge that and question with yourself, like, is this ultimately going to get at what I want, which is more control, which is kind of just like that feeling of like justification. And can I get that by taking care of myself financially? That's the best way that you can get revenge, right? Is doing what's best for you, not spending yourself into a hole.
Right. This revenge spending really doesn't help the situation. Even when you're like, well, he's wasting our family's money, I'm going to waste some too because I got to get mine. I think that it's really important to recognize that it's happening, but how do we stop it? If we recognize that we're doing that in the process of divorce, how can we get a handle on it?
Well, like I said, I mean, I feel like it always stems back to the emotions that are driving the decision, right? There's always like underlying emotions. And I say this a lot with my work and with my teachings. It's never really about the stuff. I know that you think it's about the stuff. I know that you think it's about, the purse or the handbag or, the new furniture or whatever it is, but there's always an emotion that's lying underneath the stuff and why you're doing what you're doing, why you desire the things that you desire, why you're making the choices that you are. So, what you have to ask yourself is you have to start peeling back those layers of the onion and not just looking at the surface level of, oh, I just want to go buy this expensive handbag to get back at my husband. It's like, what am I really trying to get at with accomplishing this? And then asking yourself the question, how can I accomplish that same thing without going and buying a bunch of things, going and spending a bunch of money? I find that one of the biggest things, especially with spending, is again, a lot of times comes back to that control piece. Feeling like my life is out of control. One of the easiest ways that we can feel more in control of our life is by spending money, because it's really easy for us to control that. We have complete power and complete control over what we buy, how much we spend. So asking yourself the question, how can I gift myself that control in other ways other than having to go out and buy a bunch of random things and a
Right.
bunch of random items?
Well, revenge spending and spending from a standpoint of being a little malicious is a little bit different than emotional spending, right?
Mhm.
So I think that there can be a lot of women who are going through divorce who might be engaged in this emotional spending. They're not trying to hurt anyone, but they're trying
Yeah.
to feel better in some way,
Yes.
right?
Totally. One of the biggest things with shopping that a lot of people don't really think about, because it's just so ingrained in our culture, in consumer culture just to be shoppers and to be consumers. But, and I want to make this clear too, spending money is not bad, but I always say you want to be really clear with yourself on the state of mind that you're in and the emotional state that you're in when you're shopping. Because shopping to make yourself feel better usually has the same outcome as when you're eating a bunch of sugar to make yourself feel better, drinking a lot of alcohol to make yourself feel better, mindlessly scrolling on TikTok for hours to make yourself feel better. I kind of refer to it as just like a false pleasure. It's like just a cheap hit of dopamine. The hard thing is that, of course, like eating sugar and drinking alcohol, it does feel really good in the moment. And that's the confusing part to people because they're like, it feels amazing to shop and go buy new things. And it's like, yeah, it does. But how does that feel long term? You're always going to have that crash, like how you have a sugar crash, how you have a hangover. You're always like that crash when you have that quick, like really quick hit and that really quick pick me up. The crash is always going to be waiting for you on the other side. And I know this is like an incredibly like cheesy and cliche thing to say. And I know we're all kind of sick of hearing this, but it's true. I say this all the time in my community. I'm like, you don't have a shopping problem. You don't have an overspending problem. You have a problem with not being able to feel and cope with the difficult emotion that you're currently experiencing right now. And there's been studies that have shown that when you shop when you're sad or when you shop when you're in a negative emotional state, you get that quick high, that quick pick me up, that's super quick and feels amazing. But then you're always going to crash. And then what it shows is that the crash always brings you down even farther than you were before you started shopping. So a lot of times we have the idea of, oh, I'm going to, retail therapy, right? Oh, I'm going to go buy some things. It's going to feel so good. It's going to go feel so amazing. But a couple days down the road, you're just going to find yourself right back where you started. It's just not an ultimate. It's just like all those other things I said, like the sugar, the alcohol, the numbing, the distracting. It's just not a long-term solution to really making yourself feel better and to really solving for that grief, that sadness, that anger, all of the emotions that you're probably dealing with in a divorce. It's just not it's a band-aid. It's a
Right.
band-aid. It's a temporary band-aid. It's not going to solve the solution long term.
Divorce is already such an emotional time, which is why I think that women are at such high risk of engaging in emotional spending. It is that quick high. But what I also know because of the work that I do is that divorce is financially devastating to so many women. So when they engage in this emotional spending, they're putting themselves in the hole even further financially. And so there is such a great risk there. So I want to ask you, if someone is in divorce and vulnerable to this and maybe even recognizes I am shopping to make myself feel better, are there some small things that they can do to start taking a step in the right direction towards rectifying this?
Yeah. So I think I'll offer a couple of things, right? Is if you are somebody, because I feel like there's kind of two different situations here, but if you are somebody who's already prone to doing a lot of spending and a lot of shopping, so let's just say it's just something that you've kind of gotten yourself into the habit of doing, then in the beginning, what we have to start with is we have to start with offering your brain solutions to still be giving it what it wants, which is a hit of dopamine, because that's what it's used to getting. So we can't, I feel like a lot of people hear of just like going cold turkey or doing like no spend challenges. I think for some people in certain situations that can work well and be effective. I'm actually not a huge fan of it because it's just too much of a shock and too much of a change. So finding ways that you can gamify saving money. One thing I'm really big on is I call it an urge jar, but just challenging yourself. Like the human brain loves challenges, it loves accumulation, it loves working towards a goal. So when you're in this mindset of like spend, 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 actually creating like a challenge to kind of work yourself through to where you are going to challenge yourself to process 100 urges not to buy something and not to spend money on a whim. Because if you think about it, how quick are you just to go on Amazon, boom, go online, boom, Instagram ad,
Right.
boom. Our shopping and our consumption is happening so quick. We're not even giving ourselves the time to slow down. And that's like when you get stuff and you're like, I don't even remember ordering this. Or like, why did I buy this? Like, I don't even know. Practicing slowing yourself down and gamifying that process. Like, I'll show you on video. This is a process I teach my clients, but it's just called an urge jar, where you just have 2 containers. These are like little dollar bills in mine. But every single time you process an urge to splurge, you move one trinket to another. It sounds very basic, but again, the human brain loves challenges, accumulation, working towards a goal. So if you're kind of in that habit of see it, want it, buy it, the biggest thing is start gamifying, not spending money. And I call it the 3Ds. Okay. If you're going to take one thing away from this episode, the 3Ds. Practice putting as much distance as you can between the initial desire that you have to buy something and the decision to buy it. Again, we're so quick just to be like, sure, add to cart, purchase, no problem. When you see something that you want to buy, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree, right? Prefrontal cortex goes offline. Amygdala is activating. Pleasure systems are activating. You're in a very emotional state of mind where your logical brain isn't there. Like, she's gone, right? When you can give yourself time and distance, for me personally, I always implement a 72-hour rule. Again, this isn't for like, if you just want to run through the Chick-fil-A line, but you know what I'm talking about. Like more discretionary purchases, giving yourself at least 72 hours to sit with a purchase, be with it, actually give yourself time to really think about like, do I really want this? Am I still going to be excited about this a week from now? The 3Ds, practice giving yourself distance. But I will say this, it's a skill. It is something that you have to practice.
Okay, you said there were 3Ds. The first D was distance. What are the other 2Ds?
Yeah, first D is distance, second is desire, and third is decision. So put as much distance as you can between the desire to buy something and the decision to buy it.
I love that.
Yeah.
You have a free masterclass that is called Why You Impulse Shop and How to Stop. And I'm going to put it in our show notes, but I want you to tell us a little bit about that because that seems to flow directly from what we just talked about.
Yeah, it's a 90-minute masterclass where I essentially take you through my 3-step process to stop overspending. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because there's just honestly, there's not a lot of good advice in this space. If you try to figure out, if you go to Google and you read a lot of books and a lot of traditional blogs that typically are coming from a lot of older white men, the advice that you're typically going to get to solve this problem is like, oh, just unsubscribe from emails, unfollow people. And again, from my own experience, having this, being a compulsive shopper in my younger 20s, I understand that it's much deeper than that. Like unfollowing people, unsubscribing, that ain't going to fix your problem if this is something that you're struggling with on a mental and emotional level. So that's what the masterclass will help you with, is it will really help you identify what's really causing your overspending and impulse shopping and how to actually fix it with solutions that will sustain you over the long term instead of just relying on those Band-Aid solutions.
Well, for any of our listeners who think that they might have a problem with spending, I'm going to encourage them to go take the masterclass. It's free. It's going to get you at least starting to think about how to solve your problem. We'll link to that in the show notes. We'll also link to your Overcoming Overspending community. We'll make sure people can find you on the socials. Paige, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. Awesome conversation. A lot of stuff to think about. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.